Hello, welcome to week 9 of Ethics for Behavior Analysts. This week you're going to read about some common ethical challenges for behavior analysts now that we've gone through all the guidelines. The Bailey and Birch have been going around the country now for about 5 or 6 years doing these ethical workshops where basically they do what we've been doing. They ask individuals to identify ethical dilemmas and then talk about what guidelines are relevant and what their ethical choices would be. And so by doing that, they've been able to put together a list of the most common kinds of ethical dilemmas that they face. And right at the top of that list is barriers to effective treatment. They indicate that some of the most effective barriers to effective treatment, which of course is guideline 2.10b, is funding. That they say that behavior analysts have consistently complained that administrators did not want to pay for ABA treatment. They also indicated that getting families to collect data, an issue that we've already discussed, is another barrier to providing effective treatment. And that sometimes ABA services aren't being provided because, well, the behavior analyst is part of an interdisciplinary team, and that team decides that another approach, for example, medication, psychotropic medications instead of behavioral services, or sensory interventions instead of behavioral services, is going to be more effective. Another common ethical dilemma that they talk about is barriers to the use of behavioral assessments. Again, something else we've talked about. We know that guidelines, well, several guidelines, but 3.0A, 3.02B all talk about how it is important to provide behavioral assessments before intervening with treatments. But they talk about that some of the barriers that behavior analysts have talked about is one that many behavior analysts say that they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the time to be able to do an adequate baseline or to do an adequate behavioral assessment before doing treatment. And, you know, I get it. We all get it, and all of us who have done it, but still, it's very clear. It's clear in our ethical guidelines that we need to do adequate behavioral assessments. Another barrier to doing behavioral assessments, in addition to just time, is that lack of funding, that sometimes the person who's paying for the services doesn't want the assessment. All they want is treatment, and they want treatment now. So that's another common behavioral dilemma that Bailey and Birch talk about. The third one, and we haven't talked much about this one, we've talked about the other two quite a bit, but I'm sure it'll come up again, and it is certainly a common one, are dual relationships. And of course, dual relationships are to be avoided, but they're hard to do, particularly when you're in homes. I think this has come up in the discussion forum that I think Liz has brought it up, maybe Barina has brought it up also. I think those of you who are going into people's homes are more likely to encounter this, but any of us can, and certainly I have many times. It's a slippery slope because families may be appreciative of the good work that we're doing, and so they want to do something special. So maybe they'll try to give us a gift. Maybe they'll give us a gas card. Maybe they'll dinners. That's a big one that I've gotten where families have, want to buy me dinner. And on the one hand, we want to maintain a good professional relationship with the family, so we don't want to seem unappreciative. On the other hand, we've got to be careful because it's a slippery slope. Once we start doing favors for people or accepting favors for people we're working with, then a personal relationship develops. And once a personal relationship develops, you're more inclined to do things because you're friends rather than what is in the best interest of the client. So we really have to be cautious not to develop personal relationships that cross professional boundaries. And it is a difficult one. I have fallen in this one. I can think of at least two examples where I have slipped into this one, and it's easy to tell yourself stories. I know the first time this happened to me, it was an individual I was working with that had pretty severe aggression. He was a bigger guy. He was living at home. His parents needed to go out to a wedding or something. And I volunteered to babysit. Now, in my head, I knew this was a conflict of interest, that potentially I'm going to develop some dual relationships here because I'm doing a favor for the family because they could not find anyone who would stay with this boy that they would feel comfortable with. In my own head, my rationale was, well, one, I need to have a good relationship with this family because I'm asking them to do a lot, which they were doing. Two is that, well, this would give me an opportunity to really work on some of the things that I'm talking to the family about working on with him, and I can just do them myself. However, after I realized it, it did seem that the relationship changed. And it was easy to do. It was a nice family. And in retrospect, I realized that that was an ethical violation. I allowed a dual relationship to develop, and I do think ultimately it had a negative effect on my effectiveness with this family. Treating their son's behavior problem. So these dual relationships really need to be avoided, although they are easy to fall into them. And like me, you could fall into them more than once. Again, why it's important to have other behavior analysts that you can talk to who can sort of see when maybe you are starting to develop a dual relationship with a family and help you from actually engaging in a dual relationship. All right, speaking of things like favors, the other chapter in the Bailey and Birch book that I want you to read is, I think, a really unique take on this. And basically what they do is they outline the several practical examples of how behavior analysts need to make the transition from civilian to professional BCBA life, such as, as civilians, if you will, in our personal lives, we all do favors for our friends. Our friends do favors for us. We do favors for our friends. That's part of friendship. We also give advice to our friends, and our friends give advice to us. However, those kinds of things, and many more that they talk about, represent ethical violations if we do them as a BCBA. And for some of us more than others, making that transition from civilian life to being a practicing behavior analyst is really difficult, and they point out some of the most common kinds of things that need to be different as you make that transition from civilian to professional. Okay, so this week, read these two short, interesting, easy to get through chapters 4 and 5 for Bailey and Birch. I know you read chapter 29 of Cooper already, so but I've included it again because Cooper does have some of these things, such as common ethical problems, and talks about some of the same ones that Bailey and Birch do. So I think it's worth at least looking at it again. Finally, for your assignment this week, I included a YouTube video that I think really captures nicely. Well, it exaggerates it, but it captures one of the more common ethical violations that I see in people, particularly in individuals who have just gotten their BCBAs. They've gone through all the coursework, worked hard, took the test, finally passed it, and a occupational hazard is this particular ethical dilemma that I think we all need to avoid. So what I want you to do is to review that YouTube video and comment on the ethical guidelines that you think are pertinent, the ethical violations that you think are pertinent, and how you would respond if you observe this behavior analyst. So remember, when I'm scoring these, I'm looking for both, are you highlighting the appropriate ethical guidelines? And 2 is, how you would respond if you observed this behavior analyst. Because I promise you, if you do this long enough, you will observe some behavior analysts that do at least some of the things that are in this particular video. All right, have a good week, and I will be back again next week.